True stories
that make us say,
"Wow, God."
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
All the entrances to the tracks were completely closed down. There were thousands of people in the street as we watched fighter planes flying over the city because of possible other targets that may have been designated by the terrorists.
And this guy came up to me and he said, "Oh, you got the keyboard. I came back for that." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to buy it."
You're too good to dangle an opportunity in front of me and then say, "Ha, but you can't get there." But I don't understand why I can't get there.
You may be in the middle of a wow God story that you don't know the ending to. A heartache, a circumstance, a stress is making you feel stuck. We hope the stories today that we're going to share with you, these stories of gratitude, will help affirm your realization that God is at work. My name is Ann Sorenson, and I am here with my dear friend, Lisa Williams.
And together with you, we're going to listen to true stories that make us say, wow, God, specifically stories of gratitude. The first story that you'll hear comes from a man. Mel is his name, and he was in Manhattan on September 11th, 2000. So was Ann.
Yes, I was. I was there. I was on 121st and Broadway.
Wow.
Going to grad school. The images from that day, the fear of that day, will be with me forever.
Yeah, you were in Manhattan.
And I experienced gifts from that day as I think about how humanity, neighbors, friends, professors came together to make sure that there was a community of support.
Mel was there as well, and this is his story of gratitude of how he got off of the island on 9/11.
The day started like so many other work days that I prepared for going into the city. I got up, prepared to catch my hour-and-a-half train ride from Long Island to Manhattan. My office is located on Park Avenue. It was a very clear, sunny morning, very gorgeous day, actually. When I got to the office and I took the elevator up to the 23rd floor and began to prepare for the day, it was about then that the routine of the day was abruptly changed when one of my colleagues came up to me and said that a small plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. Well, we went over to the windows and saw in the distance a slightly angled smoking silhouette of a plane that struck the tower. So instinctively, I grabbed a camera that we had in our department, and I began taking photos from the conference room window. As I was taking a few photos and just kind of observing and talking with colleagues and discussing, what could have possibly happened, that's when I saw the second tower struck. And then we learned that it was no accident, but actually a full-scale attack on our nation. Shortly thereafter, we heard about the hijackings that were taking place around the country of passenger aircraft. Then we heard that the Pentagon in Washington was hit, and soon thereafter, United Flight 93 crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So we all hung around the office a little bit, really not knowing what to do and expecting to hear some announcements, and soon we did that those who wished to go home were free to go, and that if you wanted to leave the building, you weren't able to come back in. So some people stayed overnight and some went to the trains, which is what I did. We learned that it wasn't so easy to get out of the city after all of this was taking place. If you commute from Long Island in New Jersey, you know that during a normal day, it could be rather chaotic. But at this time, the streets in Manhattan were just very strange feeling because there were no cars, there were no taxis, there was no commuter activity taking place, and all we saw was a stream of emergency vehicles that were racing downtown. Of course, the concerns were that there were going to be possible other terrorist attacks on the railroad tunnels, on the trains themselves. We didn't know what was going on. The entire railroad system in and out of Manhattan was shut down. In fact, the whole city, as you can imagine, was in a lockdown. The entire 7th Avenue was packed with people, but all the entrances to the tracks were completely closed down. There were thousands of people in the streets as we watched, in a very surreal way, fighter planes flying over the city because of possible other targets that may have been designated by the terrorists. As we're standing in the streets, we're thinking, we're just a few blocks away from the Empire State Building. The Statue of Liberty is not too far away, and we're thinking, well, perhaps there'll be attacks on bridges and other possible targets. It was just a very uncertain time, and certainly people were very concerned and worried about what was going on. So as I was standing at the 33rd Street end of 7th Avenue, there were hundreds and thousands of people really just packing the streets. It was a very chaotic moment, but personally, I wasn't feeling very anxious or nervous. I just knew that, all we had to do is get to the trains, and this way it would get us out of the city. So while I and thousands of other people were waiting, hoping for the train station to reopen, I'm just standing there, and I heard a voice, and I heard an announcement. And the announcement was that they just opened the 34th Street entrance to the train station. So I kind of paused for a moment. I didn't see anyone moving or rushing to get to the entrance. And I thought that was strange because here we were waiting for the station to open up. And when this announcement came, nobody was moving. I knew what I heard. The voice was so clear to me that it was not to be mistaken. So I moved slowly through the crowd, of course, shoulder to shoulder as it was so packed. And I was thinking, well, by the time I get to the entrance, the place is going to be mobbed and I'm not going to be able to get down the escalator. To my amazement, as I turned the corner just to get down to the station, I was still amazed that the crowd had not formed on the stairways or the escalators to catch a train. I said, didn't people hear the announcement? So for a split second, I even doubted that an announcement was made that the train station was open. It didn't sound like a voice over a loudspeaker. It sounded like somebody was in the crowd of people making the announcement saying they just opened the gates to the 34th Street entrance. And that's what I heard. And I didn't respond immediately. I just kind of hesitated because I said, you know what, with all these people here, there's just no way I'm going to make it to the other end of the street. But sure enough, nobody was moving. And I said, you know what, I'm going to listen to that voice and I'm going to check it out. And sure enough, the gate was open, the doors were open. And like I said, I was among the first people actually walking down to catch some of the first trains that were leaving Manhattan that day. Again, I was kind of puzzled, and then knowing that the Lord was with me that day, and that I was going to get out one way or another, I was certain that this voice, this announcement, was for me to make my way there before the crowd actually got there. And sure enough, I was thankful that I heard the announcement. And I was even more thankful that the voice that I heard helped me get home on that very infamous day. And even though we may not understand, and even in the most chaotic of situations, the Lord will speak to us and He will help us through every situation. So with that, I said, you know what, Lord, you are great. And I'm so thankful that I have a relationship with you so that I can hear your voice when you speak. And it was really that experience that showed me and that confirmed in my heart that the Lord was with me.
It's all about how you frame the story. You look back over your life, a particular story, you could frame it like that was the worst day of my life. And then you look with a different lens and you can say, I'm grateful for these things that happened. Today's show, today's Wild God Stories are all focusing on gratitude.
And it's interesting that so often we have that gratitude, experience that gratitude at the end of an event or at the end of a story. I'm sure when Mel was trying to get home on that day, 9/11, he wasn't feeling gratitude, but it was at the end when he's able to look back and see how his faith was affirmed.
When Anne says that, immediately that part of me that is always trying to adjust and be in Christ, I'm telling myself, even as Anne is speaking, Lisa, remember to have gratitude in the journey. Right. Little thank yous throughout the day, practicing the presence of God, practicing gratitude, even when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Thank you that you are with me.
praising, giving thanks in all circumstance.
Yes, this is the will of God for us.
Right.
And so let's keep listening to some stories about having gratitude, like this woman who expresses the gratitude that she had through the journey that was not very easy.
Hi, my name is Katie. I have a wow God story. Actually, it was just about a year ago that I was in a ugly situation where I actually had to suddenly leave my apartment and I could no longer live there. Due to the crazy situations and everything, I was couch hopping for the next couple of weeks, and the Lord just blessed me with the perfect places to stay for the situation that I was in. I had some stuff that I had to do at church, and it required me to do arts and crafts, and He supplied me with a house that had a room for arts and crafts. Like, just these little amazing things. He protected me through the whole situation, and then I was able to move in with a friend, and lo and behold, while living with that friend, she's discovered a place that a house I could actually purchase, and if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have purchased it. If it wasn't for living where I was in the situation, I wouldn't have met my current significant other. With COVID going on, I was able to be with somebody and that's a close friend of mine and be with animals, and I'm a very extrovert person. This past year, the Lord has just continuously to bless me and through some crazy stuff, and there's no other way to explain it but Him. It's literally no other way to explain the perfect timing of everything except by the grace of God, and I'm so thankful for what He has done. I am beyond blessed, and it's just amazing what He can do.
Whenever you're ready to tell your true story of what God has done in your life, if you want to be public as a city on a hill, a bright shining light, then the place to start is wowgod.com.
Also at wowgod.com, you can find out about live events that we have coming up. A live event is an opportunity to gather with a community of people who are interested in learning how to best tell the Wow God stories of their life. There will be some teaching. You'll be able to share it in a small group. And then if you'd like to share it with the larger group, the stage is yours to do so.
Anne and I have a lot of fun with this. Anne is a college professor who teaches storytelling in her film classes, and I work with radio people, helping them tell their stories on the radio with impact. And so we take a little bit of knowledge from Anne, a little bit of knowledge from me, a whole lot of love, some workshopping.
And have a great time.
Yeah, we really do. You can hear, as a matter of fact, the laughter, the joy, there's tears in the story you're about to hear. A Wow God story from a widow who was grieving, but because of a trip to a thrift store, wow God.
My story starts 5.5 years ago when my husband passed away in a car accident after 40 years of marriage. That first winter, I was, suffering loss and feeling sad and depressed. I felt so alone, and I thought, how am I going to get out of this funk? So I said, Cindy, you got to get out of this funk. You got to do something. You got to get out of this house. So I decided to go to Goodwill. And I went into the Goodwill, and I saw this keyboard, and it was $14.99. And I'd always wanted a keyboard. I don't know how to play, but I always wanted one. So, plus I had a coupon. And this guy came up to me and he said, "Oh, you got the keyboard. I came back for that." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to buy it." Anyway, I went home with the keyboard, and the demo song was my husband's and my song. And at that moment, I felt so loved by God. Because that song wasn't that popular, I thought, that's the demo song? So the demo song was my husband and my song. And yeah, I would, just walk by and play that song several times a day, and it just made me feel so loved by God. That's my story.
Cindy was brave. She got up in front of everybody at a Wow God Stories live event to share that story, to share her gratitude and her Wow God story of how God comforted her. And now another Wow God story of gratitude, and this comes from my friend Jen Driskill, who recently moved to Minneapolis to serve on the wonderful Christian radio station KTIS. You can hear Jen in the middays. And this is her Wow God story of gratitude.
This last year has been a really long year. There's this song from Unspoken, and they talk about 4 seasons of winter. And I really felt that, like, God, when is this going to end? I just felt it was time for a change. And I was knocking on doors, and they were all shut. And I kept thinking, is this me? Did I do something wrong? I don't really understand here. Because you want answers in the natural, and you don't always get that because that's not walking by faith. And then I finally had this opportunity open up at KTIS, and I thought, okay, great, it's going to be smooth sailing from here. And then it felt like it got so much harder with my house not selling, and just a challenge with a friend that I considered a really good friend. And then I guess she didn't consider me a really good friend. And it got to be, honestly, it was really hurtful and kept me up at night and upset. A lot of tears shed. And I was out walking one morning because I couldn't sleep. And I thought, God, I just don't understand. I've tried to be obedient, do what you wanted me to do. And why is this taking so much longer? I feel like you're too good to dangle an opportunity in front of me and then say, but you can't get there. But I don't understand why I can't get there. And this Holy Spirit is so sweet. And I just sensed him say, Jen, you need to know you don't have to run away from things. And if you got things in your timing, then you wouldn't know that you can work through this. And it just brings tears to my eyes because so often my timing, I want the fast forward button. Like, I just want to get on to the next thing. And God's like, no, my timing is so much better because I have so many lessons for you to learn that you wouldn't learn if you just hit the fast forward button. So I'm very grateful for God's timing. I'm a gratitude journaler. And so I'm a little behind because I've had the move and a lot of things going on. But this is definitely a story to write in my gratitude journal for the next time that God's timing is taking a lot longer than I want. And I'll always be able to go back and remember, God, I saw you at work there. I know that you're at work here.
I'm so grateful that we got a chance to hear from Jen Driskill sharing one of her Wow God stories that recently has led her to gratitude. And now Anne has a story to share with you.
It's so hard to have gratitude when we're in the middle of a story. In script writing, we call this the dark night of the soul, when all seems lost. And for me, the story that I'd like to share with you today is when my dear father, who I called Pops, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. We had noticed some changes in his memory, but we were always worried about my mom since Alzheimer's was rampant in her family, and my dad's family, it was not. I mean, he was this tall, strong, smart man. So we just excused it, gave it other reasons for why he couldn't remember little things. He had a brain surgery, an emergency brain surgery, and was not able to recover from that, which unmasked the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. I had always feared for the death of my dad. When I was a little girl, I would pray, like, God, keep him alive, keep him alive, keep him alive. That was my prayer over and over again. He was totally healthy. There was no reason for that prayer, except that I was so scared to live without him. I followed in his footsteps as a kid, literally. I mean, he was 6'8". I remember following him in the snow, and I would want my little footprints to be in his. As an adult woman, he always gave me a safe place to land. I sought him out. He was a best friend. Before we found out about his diagnosis, I remember dinner with a friend, and the friend said to me that her mom had recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she said, I'm so grateful. And I asked her, why? How can you have gratitude for the fact that your mom has this diagnosis? And she said, I could never imagine having to let go of my mom instantaneously. Now I can say goodbye to her day after day after day after day. And she saw that as a gift. And that, her sharing that with me, planted that seed in my own life. Like, that there could be another way of thinking about a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. Like I said, we had been anticipating that my mom might get that diagnosis, but not my father. But the day that we heard that he was on this journey of losing his memory and losing his life, I remember thinking, okay, I get to walk this road with him. And I remember that being such encouragement to me, that I would be able to walk this road with him with gratitude. And then I remember that night that we found out, I met the person I was dating at the time, David, who I'm married to now. But I remember sitting on the couch and just sobbing, telling him, saying, it's going to be so bad. This is going to be so hard. And I remember he said, Ann, you don't know how it's going to be. You don't know how it's going to be. Just be present. Love him. Take the time you need. And again, that was another moment of, why am I writing this story? Why am I writing this story? Like, okay, Lord. And he was. I visited Pops when he was able to live at home with my mom, and then at a care facility. I'd hold his hand. I'd be the one reminding him of stories from his youth that he had told me, the stories of our life together as a family. We'd look at each other's eyes and not say a word. Every time I left, I was able to say, Pops, thank you for being the best father to us. You were a wonderful father. I thanked him so many times that maybe his mind didn't remember it, but I'm sure his spirit did. That he did a really great job being our dad. Before this happened, I did not know how I would walk through the days of his dying. I didn't know how I'd survive. And when those days happened, they were beautiful and hard and difficult and beautiful. I remember the day before he passed, our pastor came and gave him communion. And he was able to say the Lord's Prayer. I'd never heard him put that many words together in a really long time, but he said the Lord's Prayer.
Wow, God.
And then he asked for ice cream. His favorite food. That was the last meal he ate. That was literally his last supper, was ice cream. So when I think about those days of caring for him and then being with him as he passed, I am full of gratitude that God made something that I thought would be so horrific beautiful. Another friend said to me, where there is deep love, there is deep grief. And because of that, I'm grateful for the grief, because there was deep love. And I carry that love with me. I'm able to, just like my dad gave me a safe place to land, I hope and pray that I'm able to be that safe place for others. I never would have thought when I was fearing the separation from my dad, from Pops, that I would be able to say today, wow, I'm so grateful for how he died and what God gave me in his passing. Wow, God.
Thank you, Ann, for sharing your Wow God story with us today. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing a part of your story. I feel like I know you better now. And someone listening right now is crying. Someone listening right now is remembering. Someone listening right now is believing that they might be able to have gratitude in their very difficult journey. It's risky when we tell our stories and are vulnerable. So thank you.
It feels so good to share that story with you. So thank you for listening.
This is a short life, and we're on this journey together. And so let's be bold, let's be brave, let's be vulnerable, let's be honest, let's be true, let's be noble. Let's focus on the things that are truly praiseworthy. Let's open up our mouths and tell the stories that make us say,
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
My wow God story.
I wanted to share a wow God moment.
That's my wow God story. Praise God.
And I'm so thankful to God for this wow God moment.
So, thank you, God.
You've been listening to Wow God Stories, a Wow God production, a ministry of the University of Northwestern St. Paul. Discover more at wowgod.com.